This was the largest manhunt in America since 9/11's, the most expensive and the most extreme lockdown in the nation's history. 1 million Boston residents received a mandatory order: stay indoors and shelter in place. Over 1,000 law enforcement officers flooded the city. Their target, a wounded 19-year-old college student with no way out. So, how did it all begin? April 15th, 2013, Boston, Massachusetts. The city was hosting its 117th annual marathon. 23,000 runners took to the streets, and hundreds of thousands of spectators lined both sides of Boylston Street to cheer the runners on. At 2:49 p.m., most elite runners had already crossed the finish line. The remaining crowd was mostly everyday people, families and friends waiting for their loved ones. Without any warning, a bomb detonated. Just 12 to 14 seconds later, a second bomb exploded in the crowd. Both devices were identical, modified pressure cookers packed with gunpowder, ball bearings, and nails, sealed inside black backpacks and planted in the densest parts of the crowd. The blast radius was precisely calculated, targeting the area between knee and ankle to maximize limb injuries and amputations. The attack left irreversible devastation in its wake. 3 people were killed outright. 281 others were injured, 16 of whom required amputation. The youngest to lose a limb was just 7 years old. A 23-year-old Chinese graduate student at Boston University was also killed. Her family back in China learned of her death through a live news broadcast. Completely blindsided, the blast zone stretched across Boylston Street for 15 city blocks. Thousands of investigators rushed to the scene to begin their work. Surveillance footage became the key to cracking the case. Detectives reviewed thousands of hours of footage, from street cameras, building feeds, and bystander phones. They finally captured a critical image from before the blast: 2 men carrying large backpacks moving through the crowd. When they left the finish line area, their bags were empty. 3 days after, the FBI held an emergency press conference and released clear surveillance images of both suspects. The public was warned: both men were armed and extremely dangerous. Within hours, the photos spread across the internet. Online users quickly identified the suspects: 26-year-old Tamerlan and 19-year-old Jokar Sarnayev. The brothers were originally from Kyrgyzstan and had lived in Cambridge, Boston for over a decade. The elder, Tamerlan, held a U.S. green card and had been an amateur boxer. The younger Jokar was a naturalized U.S. citizen and a sophomore at the University of Massachusetts. He was known to be quiet, reasonably well-liked, and appeared completely unremarkable to his classmates. Subsequent investigations confirmed that the brothers had learned to build bombs from an online magazine linked to Al-Qaeda. Their primary motivation for the attack was to retaliate against U.S. military operations in Muslim-majority countries in the Middle East. This stated motivation was later confirmed in a written note by Jokar himself. At the time the wanted photos were released, the 2 brothers were at their Cambridge home, watching the press conference live. For full 4 hours after the broadcast, they vanished completely from police radar. At 10:24 that night, on the MIT campus, a 27-year-old campus officer, Sean Collier, was sitting alone in his patrol car. He had no involvement in the marathon bombing investigation. He was simply carrying out his normal duties. The Sarnayev brothers approached his vehicle and fired multiple shots at close range. Sean was killed on the spot. The brothers then attempted to steal his service weapon, but the holster had a security lock they couldn't defeat. They left empty-handed and fled the scene on foot. Shortly after, the brothers carjacked a man at a gas station in Cambridge and forced him into the vehicle. The hostage was made to drive for 30 minutes before the car pulled into a Shell station in Watertown. While Jokar went inside to grab supplies, the hostage seized the moment and jumped out. He immediately called 911. The stolen car was equipped with an OnStar GPS system, allowing police to track it in real time. The final pursuit was now underway. At 12:20 a.m., Watertown police intercepted the vehicle. A fierce gunfight broke out immediately. 7 minutes of close quarters shattered the quiet of a residential neighborhood. The brothers hurled pipe bombs and additional pressure cooker devices as they fled. Tamerlan fired continuously with a 9mm handgun. Investigators later recovered 56 shell casings from the scene. Hit by multiple gunshots, Tamerlan lunged forward and fought officers hand to hand. He was then tackled and subdued. At that critical moment, Jokar jumped into the stolen car and floored it through the police perimeter, running directly over his own brother. The car dragged Tamerlan's body nearly 30 feet. The vehicle then crashed to a stop. Jokar, badly wounded, disappeared into the dark streets of Watertown. The gunfight also left a transit police officer struck by stray fire, nearly bleeding out before help arrived. As for Tamerlan, he died from a combination of gunshot wounds and trauma sustained in the struggle. Jokar was now alone and on the run, seriously wounded, with no car, no phone, and no escape plan. Yet somehow he managed to hide within a massive police cordon and evade over 1,000 armed officers, thermal imaging helicopters, and every federal and local emergency resource in the country, all deployed at police planned a grid-by-grid search covering every building in 20 Watertown blocks, every garage, every shed, and basement. By dawn on April 19, police had completed their perimeter setup. At 6 a.m., the governor of Massachusetts officially issued a mandatory shelter-in-place covering Boston and surrounding communities, Watertown, Cambridge, Newton, and beyond. Residents across the entire area were ordered to stay home and not go outside. No one except law enforcement was permitted to knock on doors. A Homeland Security expert later stated that the U.S. had never before locked down an entire city for a single fugitive. The city came to a complete standstill. Public transit was suspended. Sporting events were canceled. Businesses shut their doors. 1 million residents stayed silent indoors. Highway signs across the region scrolled shelter-in-place alerts on repeat. Boston had become a ghost city. The search continued without pause throughout the day. Multiple teams fanned out across sectors, reaching doors and sweeping every corner of every home. Helicopters circled overhead, scanning continuously with thermal cameras, searching for any sign of a living heat signature. Everyone was confident that a suspect bleeding from his wounds would eventually give himself away. But everyone had overlooked one critical blind spot. Jokar wasn't moving at all. Instead, he had quietly crawled inside a recreational boat in a backyard. The 24-foot fiberglass boat belonged to 66-year-old retired telecom technician David Hannaberry. The boat was wrapped in white shrink wrap for winter storage and sat on a trailer in his backyard. It was less than half a mile from where Tamerlan had been shot and killed. It was entirely within the police cordon, but the thick fiberglass hull and the outer shrink wrap perfectly insulated Jokar's faint body heat. For a full 16 hours, helicopters using thermal cameras made multiple low passes over the boat and detected nothing inside. Later economic assessments showed that a single day of total lockdown cost the greater Boston area more than $300 million. By evening, after a full day of searching with 0 leads, no sightings, and no breakthroughs, the exhausted law enforcement teams At 6 p.m., reluctantly lifted the shelter-in-place order. The city began to reopen. After a day of extreme tension, Boston finally exhaled. During the lockdown, David had already noticed something odd in his backyard. The weatherproof cover had come loose. The outer shrink wrap showed signs of damage and shifting, but with the lockdown in force, he couldn't go outside to check. Once the order was lifted, he immediately went out to inspect the boat. The moment he climbed up, he spotted a stark bloodstain on the deck. He moved to the engine side and found a man barely clinging to life, hidden deep inside the hull. David went straight back inside and called 911. In interviews afterward, he said that coming face to face with a fugitive and getting out of there unharmed was all luck. Within minutes of the call, the block was sealed off again. Police deployed a robotic arm to pull back the fiberglass hull's wrap, then used thermal imaging to confirm a living heat source inside. Negotiators moved in, while flashbang grenades were deployed to apply tactical pressure. After a nearly 2-hour standoff, at 8:45 p.m., Jokar raised his hands and surrendered. He was taken into custody on the spot. Crowds waiting beyond the perimeter and officers on the scene broke into applause and cheers. David Henneberry, the boat's owner, declined all public donations and insisted that every dollar raised go directly to the victims of the attack. He consistently refused to be called a hero, saying he was just an ordinary man who noticed something was off. Jokar was then transported to the same hospital where his brother had died. A gunshot wound to the throat left him with permanent speech damage. 3 days after his arrest, he was formally charged in his hospital room with using weapons of mass destruction to commit an act of terrorism. Meanwhile, MIT held a memorial for Officer Sean Collier, attended by thousands. A permanent memorial was erected at the site where he was killed. A young officer who had nothing to do with the attack, simply doing his job, had become an innocent victim of senseless extremist violence. In March 2015, the trial formally began. The defense team did not contest Jokar's role in the attack. They argued only that he had been psychologically dominated by his older brother. In April of the same year, the jury found Jokar guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to death in May. The legal proceedings that followed were turbulent. In 2020, a federal appeals court overturned the sentence, citing procedural flaws in the jury selection process. In 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court voted 6-3 to reinstate the death sentence. As of 2026, Jokar remains held at a federal supermax prison in Colorado on death row. Legal appeals are still ongoing. That's all for this episode. See you next time.